My academic background is in electronics engineering, and I ended up studying at MIT as a result of a physics professor at high school, actually. So I was in physics class, and we were watching a video like you do in high school, and it was about a robotics competition, and happened to be about this school I'd never heard of. And I asked him afterwards, where was that? And he said, oh, this is this school in Boston called MIT. And I said, oh, I'm going to have to look that up. And went through this process of discovering what MIT was, and then became enamored with it and became really excited about the idea of going there, and ended up taking lots of classes once I got there. So I went there thinking I would either be a mechanical engineer or an electrical engineer, and I ended up doing electrical engineering, but along the way studied crazy things like philosophy and film studies and women's and gender studies. And so it was really something else than what I expected when I got there. So it wasn't that I was purely going to a tech school like I thought, but I ended up going to a place that really made me look at the world through new technical eyes, but also through brand new eyes on lots of subjects. I see design as making elegant solutions in the world where there are possibilities to simply have solutions. We want solutions that achieve a certain elegance, either through visual form or through physical form, that may also serve a very specific technical solution space, but also really bring to the world a new kind of joy in either the way they look, the way they feel, the way you interact with them. And these things can be independent. It can be a design team and an engineering team working completely independently on things, or it can be somehow inside the same individual or the same team. And I like to see it as the concept of an individual embodying both the engineering mind and the design mind, to be able to shift along a spectrum, to be thinking in an unconstrained way about how a solution could look, and that's from the design side, and then knowing how the world works and how materials work to apply that unconstrained idea in a space where you actually have realities that you have to face, that this can only be this shape and this can only stretch that far. And so you have to find a way that those two come together. And I think that's where you can see design being very valuable, that you take what would normally be purely a technical problem, bring in some element of unconstrained creativity into that space, do it methodologically, and you get usually or oftentimes a much more elegant and joyous answer out of that problem. So my experience with design schools in India is quite limited, actually. So I've seen a few, I've visited a few, and I would be a little bit presumptuous to know exactly what comes out of the curriculum, or how the curriculum are exactly structured. So I would say that for each student who studies design, or a combination of design and engineering, there's always some bigger picture you have to be aiming towards. And so it isn't that you as a student are aiming to be the best with a pen on paper or be the best with CAD tools on a screen. It's that when you see a problem, you're able to pull it apart into its pieces and understand there's a moment where I can be purely generative, and there's a moment where I'll be purely testing my ideas, and there'll be a moment where I'm purely sharing those ideas with other people. And as you do that, you start to build up this set of skills that it spans design and other fields. You have this very easy way then to look at anything in the world and say, I want to understand how that could be better. And either it's policy in government, or it's a physical thing in the world, or it's a financial transaction, or whatever it is. It's actually the same set of skills to be able to look at a problem, pull it to its constituent pieces, and then piece it back together with maybe better components inside. So when I'm doing projects, it's oftentimes with many different stakeholders. And so when I do projects in the professional world, you typically have a client, and you have someone who maybe has commissioned the work, that may be the client or it may be a third party. And so you have a kind of larger group of individuals where there's a technical team that's working on the problem, and there's a design team, and maybe there's an art team, who are all coming together. And so you're having to actually reconcile the different viewpoints. And I think that's a big piece of working on these kinds of projects, where you're, especially in the world of interactivity, you're definitely having to reconcile the fact that you probably can't solve the entire thing yourself, and therefore you need to know how to slice a problem into pieces that others can actually contribute to. And so when I do projects with students, oftentimes we have the same process we go through there with students is looking at which pieces we are experts in, which pieces we're not experts in, do the pieces we're experts in. If we choose to want to develop our expertise further in another realm, we oftentimes will slice off a little bit of that if we're the ones in charge of developing the project, to actually slice and say, we want to get smarter at this. And so we will say, that is normally someone else's job, but we want to get smarter at that too. And that means we can do different projects in the future, and we can grow what we're able to do in a way that, otherwise we would just stay to our one physical realm of expertise and not be able to have a bit of lateral freedom to choose to do either an independent project using that new piece of information that we have, or doing another contract project with that information we had. And so those are ways that you can actually both do projects and grow what you're capable of doing. Yeah, so I think anyone who's looking at doing engineering and design, or a mix of design and engineering, I think there's a basis that you need to form, especially as you're moving forward in your studies, to either take a deep breath and actually pause is one big piece of advice I often give to our students, to say it's okay to be off the clock for a while. Maybe take a gap year. That's actually an excellent choice for many students, to really revisit their thinking. I think that's an awesome choice for most students, and I'm amazed that more American students don't do it. And so there's a rush to complete that actually may be counterproductive. And once you've gotten back into the swing of things and are there with your clearer mind, I think usually you see this world of design and engineering as probably melding together in a way that means you would probably want to have your foot in both worlds as much as you can, that you maybe take a pathway where you study engineering as an undergraduate, and you do this with the goal in mind that you're going to go to graduate school for design. Going the other way towards design as an undergraduate is less common, I think, and I think there's a reason why that's true, and that's the fact that design as a skill and as a set of skills tends to be this kind of holistic piece that you can more readily access those skills and more readily apply those skills once you've seen the kind of pathways that either engineering allows, or maybe computer science, or maybe that some other studies would allow. So even if you go the pathway of design, I would really strongly recommend finding a way to cross-register in another university and take some technical courses if your design course doesn't allow that for you. I think those are the things where, when you bring those two fields together, you become very, very a force to be reckoned with, basically. Yeah. So for gap years, I suggest people do the craziest things that have nothing to do with their studies. So I took a gap year midway through my career, actually, and it wasn't a full year, but it took a gap 6 months, and I went to Sydney, Australia, and studied cooking. I enrolled in the Cordon Bleu School of Cooking from France, and took 6 months to become a qualified chef. I don't cook as a career, I never will cook as a career, but it's a passion that allowed me to also see what I was doing in my electronics engineering job totally differently when I came back. And so I think when you take those steps into a gap year, or into a space where you need or want to get away from whatever the pathway you currently were on, then the more you go away from it, the better it is when you come back, I think. So I think engineering design and spaces surrounding that really support many different career paths. And I would say, first and foremost, engineering as a career that has been, tinted and tinged with design as a flavor into it, I think that by itself makes you a much more interesting problem solver in the world, but also going into consultancy. So I think that's a pathway that oftentimes, if you have this set of skills where you're able to switch between the purely creative and the purely technical, or the purely reductive reasoning that may be encouraged by engineering, you're able to then help many people see better solutions to their problems. And I think once you're into that space of being able to shift between different modes of seeing a problem, you're very valuable in many different career fields. And I think the pure design side can be nurtured and grown, and you can become an independent designer, or you can work in a firm who does product industrial graphic design. I think, again, you'd like to specialize and not just find yourself there accidentally, but certainly if that's a passion of yours, you can purely go into that space, but know from the engineering side that you have a set of skills that will be different from your colleagues. And the same if you go into engineering. If you go purely into a kind of mechanical engineering solution space of working for a company who does mechanical engineering, your design experience will change the way you give answers, and I think will highlight your extra set of values that you come to the job with. At NY Abu Dhabi, most or many of our students have very generous scholarships, either that they have acquired themselves or they have been arranged by the university. And so we have a lot of students who are benefiting from the Abu Dhabi government, who has sponsored a lot of the tuition payments for students, plus students who have come in with their own scholarships. More broadly, in terms of graduate degrees and further education, it's pretty typical inside of engineering or sciences that you'll get a funded PhD in the US if you're heading to the US. If you're headed to Europe, you'll also find opportunities there for funding at the master's level and the PhD level. Many of that will be coming from EU funding, so there'll be EU research grants and things that have been allocated for specific research labs, wherein they have applied for a master's student or a PhD student. It's less common in the US to find a funded master's program, but they're available as well. And I think there you would typically have a principal researcher who has already lined up grants wherein you would have a specific line available for a master's student.